Welcome back, wild ones. Today's episode is a tender one, and it is titled, When Did You Begin to Shrink? We want to explore the origin of self-shrinking behavior and how it maybe traces back to early narratives and experiences, and how do we rewrite that narrative? This is for the parts of you that learn to become small, to stay safe, quiet to be loved, or invisible to avoid harm.
Absolutely. We're asking a powerful question today. When did you begin to shrink? And not just why, but when? That moment in time, that shift when you could feel in your bones, So let's go there gently together.
So, we want to just guide you into a nice deep breath. Just let yourself arrive, open to hear these stories today and maybe even look at your own story. If you're driving, please be careful in that relaxation, but we welcome you to just go inward, to find out what caused you to shrink.
You could be apologizing for existing, dimming your joy so that others aren't uncomfortable. How many times have you found yourself, not wanting to speak out, not wanting to speak the truth? Hey, maybe if I just stay quiet, then I won't, I don't want to upset the boat. I don't want to rock the boat. But by doing that, you're abandoning your own needs by not speaking your truth, by not engaging in your joy. Just because your joy makes someone uncomfortable doesn't mean that you shouldn't be happy, right? You shouldn't stay quiet if you have something to say and it's respectful and kind and it's truthful, then say it. You don't want to abandon your own needs just to make someone else happy, because you'll never truly, if they're not happy, that other person you're trying to make, it's the old adage, what have you done for me lately? You can give and give and give, but if you're not taking care of yourself, you're going to continue to shrink and shrink and shrink until there's almost nothing left. So that's what we're going to talk about now. Like, right, what does it mean to shrink? How do we overcome that? And yes, it may be uncomfortable. Yes, it may mean talking when you were told to be quiet. And yes, it may involve rocking the boat. But you know what? That's what we're going to engage in, and we're going to talk about it, and we're gonna do this together.
I think that's a great way of looking at it. It's going to be uncomfortable to step into something we don't know. But you're right. The art of self-minimizing isn't serving people long-term or holistically. And we often see that those self-minimizing behaviors, like you said, staying quiet because you don't want to speak the truth or rock the boat. We often see those people titled like quote unquote peacekeepers, the fixers, the over-functioning ones. And it's because it's often created in their origin story. Like, how many times I know there's like these TikToks out there these days that are asking kids like how to finish the sentence, which is kids are supposed to be, and then they pause. Well, our generation is kids are supposed to be seen and not heard, right? We're supposed to stay quiet even when we have something to say. And thank goodness, at least those that are recorded on TikTok, the kids have something completely different, more healing and fun in response to that statement. But sometimes that's as far back as our origin stories can go. So today we're really asking, what was that moment you learned it wasn't safe to be fully you?
Absolutely. So right now we're just gonna kind of pause. You're gonna take a deep breath, and if you're in a before we do this, make sure you're in a safe space. And like one of my our favorite meditation people that we listen to has a British accent, so at this moment, do not operate machinery or be in a place where you are unsafe. How's my British accent? Is that okay?
It's sounding absolutely great.
Cheerio, cheerio.
If
Okay.
we have any British listeners, I hope they feel the same. But for an American British accent, this is nailing it.
I love it. But don't be, don't operate machinery. We want you to be mindful. We want you to be safe. We want you to be, we obviously not driving. So we're gonna, for those people that are listening at home on your couch, just take this moment, take a few deep breaths in and out, and we're gonna slow things down here a bit and just kind of talk to our inner selves for a little bit.
We're going to ask that you close your eyes, or if you don't feel comfortable closing your eyes, maybe you want to journal this. Next question. Was there a moment in childhood, adolescence, or even young adulthood when you learned being big, bold, or expressive came with consequences? We're going to go into sharing a little bit about our own story this episode of a time that, we learned that we were maybe shrinking. And so for me, I kind of joked in some earlier episodes that Marcus's mom was like, you can be anything you want to be. And it wasn't that my parents didn't have that narrative. In fact, they very much did. It was just geared towards more of a scholastic, be anything you can be rather than artistic. And so, they really did. They told me I could do whatever I set my mind to, and they encouraged that. But I remember when I was being really expressive about wanting to be a therapist in high school, and Mr. Myers, wherever he may be, he was my avid teacher at the time. And he said to me when he heard that my career goal was to be a therapist, that I couldn't do that. I was too emotional, too essentially soft, and that I would cry in all of my sessions with my clients. And I said, I don't think that's true, Mr. Myers. And then he gave me the scenario. Well, what are you going to do when a woman comes in to your therapy office and shares that she's been abused by her husband and, is afraid to leave, but is also in danger? You're probably going to cry and not be able to help her in that crisis. So already in that moment, I could feel myself shrinking, like, maybe I'm questioning myself, like maybe I'm actually not bold or not, maybe I'm too expressive and not bold enough or big enough or strong enough to be able to do this work. And so I went home and told my parents, I don't think I can be a therapist because Mr. Meyer says I can't. And my dad was fueled with fire. He was big, bold, and expressive. He never really was shrinking of himself in that way. So he went down to the high school and he told Mr. Myers, and I'm pretty sure it included like a arthritic point of a finger at him, that no one was going to tell his baby girl that she couldn't do something. And I don't know if I built my whole career on that moment, but it definitely was some times that I could see myself shrinking. And I share that story because it also kind of came back around once I finished my undergraduate degree in social work. I was working at a nonprofit and I had a woman who was my boss, and she often told me, wow, you're so smart for your brain not being fully developed. And that really caused me to shrink. I knew I was good at what I did. There was a reason that they wanted me to work there right after undergrad with very little work experience in the field. And yet I totally allowed myself to shrink in that workplace because, quote unquote, my brain wasn't fully developed. And it kind of stuck with me until I left that job. And when I left that job, I said, I'm not going to let this kind of follow me to my next place. So those were just moments where kind of in my business, I felt like I was shrinking because people didn't think I was capable or tried to diminish what I was actually capable of.
Absolutely, and thanks for sharing that very vulnerable story. I have a few stories on myself too, and again, but just to kind of go back to what you said, you did on both times change that narrative, what we talked about beginning.
Hmm.
The person had that narrative of you're not going to be a social worker. You said, I'll show you, and now you're the best in the business, if I can say so objectively. And also to even just having your own private practice that you successfully have. It's still growing, right? Our Luminous self is still growing, but you've changed both narratives. They try to set that narrative for you, and you said, nope, this is my story, my narrative, and, get out of my way. Watch out, world, here's where I can come. So that's very, proud of you for, sharing that and changing your narrative. And you let yourself shrink in that moment, but you didn't stay there. So that's kind of the whole purpose of this. So again, as I tell my story, uh, everyone out there listening, again, just because you have shrunk doesn't mean you need to stay there. So it's just a kind of I have two stories. So one is when I was in eighth grade. So, I lived in across the street from a high school, and then one day I came home and then when I was home, my neighbor across the street says, "Hey, come over and hang out with me. Let's talk." So I went over there, and again, mind you, I'm only 12 at the time, and then this is about 10 o'clock when this high school had their fair going, and their older cousin who had to have been at least like 28, had a beard, was fully grown, thought that me and the cousin were more than friends. We were just friends. But what happened was they ended up beating me up across the street from my own house. And it's just so like, it just to even get jumped, for not just getting jumped, but getting jumped by someone that's twice your age, it's compounded by I should feel safe in my own neighborhood, so that moment alone made me just feel unsafe and I started to shrink. But then I had solace and I told my brother at the time, hey, here's what happened, and like, you're my big brother, but I don't want you to do anything, I just need to talk to someone. And he said, yeah, I'll trust you, you can trust me. I won't tell mom and dad. uh and he didn't, until a few years later, where he got in trouble, and then he's like, "Yeah, well, I didn't. Why am I getting in trouble? Marcus so and so 2 years ago, he got jumped, and he never told you." And my parents were like, it shifted to, wait, what did you what? And then it's like, even though it was 3 years ago, I ended up getting in trouble. I ended up like the whole blame was off of him. They totally forgot about his story. So now I shrunk again because I can't even trust my own brother. So my world was shaken, and to this day, I would never trust him with anything because I just felt so betrayed, and just I felt so small because I was like, wait, he was my world. He's my big brother, and so for him to do that, um, so it came with the consequences of, just feeling not safe and not being able to trust anyone. And then later on, just to kind of fast forward again, so actually I did have issues with trust with people. I didn't trust a lot of people. And so I had another person I was great friends with in high school, who I trusted. And then um, they owed my parents money. And I was like, hey, you owe my parents money. And, I know that, recent events have happened but you still, owe them money. He's like, yeah, yeah. I'll pay them back, I know. And this is not like $10, $20. This is like over $2,000. And he made it seem that how dare I burden him when my parents used their hard-earned money to they've looked after him when even his own parents didn't. They looked at him at his when his life was in the toilet, and he wouldn't pay them back. He ghosted me. Not just like, I don't get ghosting me, but just like to do that to my parents, like, then my trust was even more shattered. I was like, okay, can I just trust? So I did have trust issues, but I learned to be selective in who I trust. So while like I said, I changed the narrative and saying, just because I've known you my whole life, my brother, or my then best friend in high school for 15 years, doesn't mean I also necessarily, you don't automatically gain my trust because of length of years I've known you. I am going to now take individual applications, person at a time, and I will trust you based off of our relationship, but not based off of the time we have together. So, and then today I do have relationships that are built on trust, they're strong. So that narrative did change. I was feeling small and like just vulnerable, where my trust was betrayed by two of the closest people that I've known over half my life. And then, now I said, okay, I'm going to be selective, I'm going to be intentional, and I've, come from instead of shrinking, I've used it to change my narrative and to grow as well.
I love that. And trust me, I know sharing personal stories can be vulnerable, but I also think that that is what makes your coaching style and even my therapy style so unique is that we're willing to be somewhat transparent with our listeners, like the wild ones out there, but also with our clientele because we learn from doing this life together. And you started and ended with, we didn't stay there. So, even if life has kind of caused us to shrink, we can at least be thankful that life isn't like a cotton t-shirt that was thrown into the dryer too soon.
Yeah.
It doesn't have to stay in that smaller state. Like we can totally tap in to a new narrative. And so this is where it all fast forwards to, right? Like, what's the cost of staying small today? What's the cost to you for not trusting? Or what's the cost to me if I believe I'm not going to be good at the job that I've literally built my whole life on? And so, for our listeners out there, what's your cost? Are you holding back in any relationships? Are you holding back from job opportunities? Maybe you're extremely exhausted from people pleasing, or you are ready and craving something bigger, but afraid to take up space. And all of this is kind of putting a cost on you, right? It's making you exhausted. But just like you shared, it's about trusting again. It could be about loving again. It could be about building your own business. Shout out, by the way, my brain is fully developed since I'm over the age of 25. So, we're going to crave something as big as this developed brain can create. And on that same narrative that like life doesn't have to be stuck this way, this is probably our smoothest transition into musical muse break
The
because
musical news break of the week.
yes, you came up with not one, but two songs. So take it away.
Absolutely. So this is from one of my absolute favorite artists ever, Lin-Manuel Miranda, shout out, he's done so many things, right? But my favorite musical that he's done is Hamilton. And again, this is so ironic because first listening to Hamilton, obviously you have My Shot, that first half, and that second half of the musical wasn't never my favorite. I was like, yeah, it's fine. But the more you listen to it and the more that you just take that pause, it actually is amazing in some ways better than the first half because it ties in to the beginning. It changes the narrative. So the two songs that we want to talk about actually tie into the same narrative. So the first one is the burn. Okay, so the just to give you some backstory for some people that aren't Hamilton, they don't know the musical. Alexander
But if you
Hamilton
don't know the musical, go out and watch
and
it
listen,
on Hulu and Disney Plus, right? Like
absolutely.
go listen, go watch.
Listen to it on Spotify, then watch it on Disney Plus if you have it. But so Alexander Hamilton, again, historic figure for the younger people out there. Look him up. Many accomplishments. Had an affair on his wife, and his wife, who adored him, who loved him, was just heartbroken. And one of the songs, just called, which is "Burn," if you listen to it, she's said, "I'm taking myself out of the narrative. I'm erasing myself. You no longer have the right to share my bedroom with me, my love, or anything." She says, I'm done. You've humiliated me just to save your own reputation. I'm removing myself from the narrative. She probably felt like she was shrunk in that moment. Her husband betrayed her. Not only did her husband betray her, it was a public betrayal. He released something called the Reynolds pamphlets that just publicly opened up so he could save his reputation. But then instead of shrinking, she said, I'm going to stop. I'm going
And I think for just the Gen Zers out there who don't know what the Reynolds pamphlets are, just think about someone cheating on you and then going and making it viral on any social media platform. This is what Hamilton did. and think about just how small you might feel in that moment.
Absolutely. And instead of her doing that, she says, I'm going to. She didn't, no one moved her from the narrative. She removed herself. So that was Burn. And then you come together to the last song, the very last song of the play, which is called Who Lives, Who Dies, Who Tells Your Story. And then it goes over the different presidents and what they've done. But then it has a pause and it says, Eliza, and she tells her, I've put myself back in the narrative. She chose to put herself back in. No one forced her, but also the most important thing is it was her narrative. She changed the narrative. She says, "I'm taking this horrible thing that happened, putting it aside, and I'm going to help finish your passion. I'm going to help you start an orphanage. I'm going to help you write letters against slavery. I'm going to help you finish your dream, even though you're not alive. I'm going to, use that moment of shrinkage to build myself up, to build, to preserve our relationship, and just, to forgive you. And then that's sometimes when you're feeling like you're shrinking, you need to, forgive whoever, maybe forgive yourself for even allowing to be shrunk. So change that narrative because you can change it. It's not too late to change it. And, just do it one step at a time and, go, just one step.
And I think that, we can recognize how for Eliza, her shrinkage in that moment, her shrinking herself or moving herself from the narrative, deleting those letters, um, I want to make it so clear that like that was not Eliza being weak and incapable of handling all that fell out from that, but it was wisdom. She said, let future historians wonder how I reacted because I am going to protect myself. And we can recognize that shrinking was once a protective factor. And at some point, it did help you survive. It kept you loved, it kept you safe. But now you need to let that armor go. You don't need to be small anymore. And in my sessions with clients, I'm always asking them, how much longer do you want to stay in this old narrative? You set this up to protect yourself, but it is no longer serving you. And so that's just kind of where we're at. It's like if we're not going to shrink anymore, we're going to change. What's our invitation?
That's a great question. So, the invitation, like you said, it isn't to shame the part of you that adapted. It's to thank them and gently invite them into being externally present. Like you said, it's not weakness, it's wisdom and it's adaptability and survivability. We get it. But change isn't always, it's not bad, always necessarily. Sometimes it's necessary. So while we're, you know, doing something because we're comfortable, maybe it's time to be uncomfortable in change. Change is uncomfortable sometimes, as long as it's good change, change for the better. Like I said, change to build your inner peace, change to build your inner self. It may be uncomfortable, it may be unpleasant, but that's why we have these conversations because there's people that would rather stay in an uncomfortable situation or a toxic relationship or toxic situation because it's familiar instead of changing. But let's not let ourselves stay shrunken. Let's not let ourselves shrink, but let us change for the better, change for positive, and and let's play with a new question, right? Where you are, where are you ready to take up space again? Like when are you ready to take up space? Are you ready to do it with your voice, or with your joy? To get some rest or just to speak the truth. Like in what way do you want to make yourself, take up more space instead of being shrunken, but just expand your inner self? And again, we keep saying wild one. Yes, expand your wild one.
I love that. And let's just remember for the wild ones out there listening today, like let that live in your body this week. Where and when are you ready to take up that space? Let your body be ready to take up space and really question yourself. What would it look like to reclaim 10% more space in your life? 10% may not feel like a lot, but it may give your holistic self so much more space, no pun intended, but ability to flourish.
Absolutely. And then just also, challenge yourself, even if it's a little bit, like just small steps, but it may be uncomfortable, but again, if you have questions about how to maybe create more space, engage us in the chats, reach us out on our email. That's why we have this platform, and we'll cover it in a future topic. So to the wild one inside, you're not too much. You never were, you never are.
And you are so allowed to take up space, to breathe deeply, to be fully seen, to be loud.
And we're always glad that you're with us, so just keep listening and keep engaging, keep listening to yourself, and just be who you truly are, loving, kind self, and, just keep expanding outwards. And as always, we just want to just tell you,
Welcome home,
welcome
wild
home,
one.
Marlon.